Okay, good evening. I'm live here with Bobby Spags from Spags Unfiltered. And, I had Bobby on, I don't know, I think you were like my third or fourth maybe interview, man. I had you on a while ago. And yeah, I really enjoyed that interview. However,
Me too.
it, however, it was taken down because it was determined we spoke about something we wasn't permitted on this platform, and so that interview I will say does exist, and it exists over on Rumble and it exists over on Odyssey. So if anybody's interested in what we talked about and isn't afraid to be misinformed, you can go over there and check it out over there. But yeah, I wanted to have you back on because, again, I had a really enjoyable conversation when we were on before, and just talk about a few issues maybe. So first, man, why don't you just, for those that don't know who Bobby Spags is and Spags Unfiltered, why don't you just give a brief summation of who you are and what your channel's about?
Buyer beware. I'm not kind to the ideologically evil. Spags Unfiltered is pretty much my therapy. It's how I rant into a camera. And for some crazy reason, people tend to agree with me, at least in part, right? I'm going to address issues that certain streaming platforms or other social media platforms might not like me to address. I'm going to tell the truth as I see it and welcome feedback. Been in the preparedness community for almost 24 years. That's morphed into the freesteading community, which you know well and others know well, the homesteaders and then the freesteading thing. I do a little bit of consulting work for a company called EMP Shield. I work with the Midwest Preparedness Project, and I go to events like SRF and SRE and others of that nature and try to spread the word of self-sufficiency and freedom.
Right. How long have you been doing the preparedness stuff?
Since
When did you,
1998.
right. And again, what was your motivation for going down that road?
It started out because I grew up in a very right-wing Christian home. And so I was exposed to eschatology, the study of end times. So that was always something in the back of my head. And then by the time I turned 18 and left home, Y2K was looming right there, and my dad was Air Force. So I grew up in the Cold War in Europe and some other places like that. So I know what it was like watching, the F8s and the F4s come screaming over the line from East Berlin, smoking with bullet holes in their tails. I know what it's like to live in a foreign country, and my dad has to grab his gas mask and run out the door as quickly as he can in his full battle fatigues just to go cook, because that's what he did. He was a cook in the Air Force. I knew what it was like to grow up all over the United States. So current events, news, politics, I grew up around all of that, and it pretty much permeated my young mentality back then. And so I would say that having a little bit better understanding of geopolitics and religion and that stuff by the time I was 18 made me realize there's more to the world than just, Hardee's and McDonald's and the mall.
Right. Yeah, preparedness is one of those things that I think everybody does, but yet people are hesitant to call themselves a prepper. Because if you have more than one roll of toilet paper, you're preparing for something, right? So it's just to what extent you are preparing, and what are those things that you're actually preparing for. So why do you think that there's this perception among some that like being a prepper is a bad word or kind of makes you an outlier?
I mean, let's be honest. Nat Geo didn't do us any favors, right? They were putting people on there who had armies of dogs with titanium teeth that were eating raw yak meat north of the Arctic Circle, and that was what it meant to be a prepper. Or the crazy cat lady who had a semi-truck drive up at 2 a.m. and offload pallets of Captain Crunch. Nat Geo didn't do us any favors. YouTube didn't do us any favors. And they made everything became doomsday, right? And that kind of drove the narrative. And then from 2008 until the end of the Obama administration, prepping became synonymous with, well, you just don't want a black guy in the White House. and the left kind of framed the narrative in this racist, way of looking at it. And so we were kind of behind the power curve for a long time as far as narrative. And nobody that got put into the mainstream media to talk about it were logically thinking, even keeled folks.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think that's it's one of those things that kind of puts people on their heels, when somebody accuses you of being something, even though it's not something that traditionally has been something frowned upon or looked badly upon. But I tend to agree with you, man, that that's kind of the way that things have gone, is they've tried to isolate and, label people that are putting away a few things for themselves. So it's just kind of an interesting thing.
Sure.
Got some folks in the chat tonight I wanted to say hey to. What's up, Brady? Brady's in the house. Chuck Peoples, Tag from Life Done Free. Jules, how are you this evening,
folks?
Yeah, Joey Rowland. He's got his own stash, man. He's got 9 rolls. He's good to go. Right on, man. Yep. Skane's girl, good evening. Good to see you.
I finally met Skane's girl in the flesh. She came to Midwest Preparedness last weekend, cool. So we got to meet for real. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I that's cool. I'm glad you got a chance to meet, because so often we see people in the chat, and then it's always good to put a face to the name. And whenever you can see them in person, it's super cool. So, yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask you, man, is like, you've called yourself, I've heard you identify yourself in this way, as an anarchist. And I think that there's a lot of people that may think that an anarchist is somebody who walks around and smashes windows in Portland, Oregon, all dressed in black. Right. I know that there's people that think that, because again, that's one of those things that is planted into people. It's a seed that's planted. Hey, this is what an anarchist is. Sure. But you call yourself an anarchist. So why don't you identify exactly what that is? Because I think there's people that have a misconception.
Well, sure. And to be fair, the anarchist movements really were left-wing forever, especially in Europe during the Cold War and in the World War II world. Some of the anarchist factions that started to pop up, it all tended to be left-wing. And so they, unfortunately, again, they were the Nat Geo of the time. They got to jump right on the bandwagon and drive the narrative early on. All that an anarchist really is, and I'm going to quote one of my favorite podcasters. His name is Michael Malice. If you have any questions about anarchy or agorism, he's the guy to listen to. He basically says, you don't speak for me. Everything else is practical application. We have this nonsensical concept in the modern world that because of the fact, through no fault of your own, through nothing you did, you just magically were born in a geographical space where generals, politicians, and bankers drew an imaginary line in the sand that doesn't exist anywhere in nature for the most part, other than the rivers that they kind of helped to create these borders. And we are now subject to the rules forever because a bunch of dudes with wooden teeth and powdered wigs said so, and we have no say, right? Now, I'm not being disparaging. I'm not one of those guys who stands on the back of the giants and calls them out. But the fact of the matter is that government over time has evolved. We've gone from the Bronze Age to feudalism, the aristocracies, and now we have republics, democracies, and semi-communist nations. But the fact is, no matter how advanced the system gets, it always goes corrupt, because every system of government is a system of man. And when systems of man become a little aged, they all tend to become very, very corrupt. And so someone like me doesn't believe that we'll ever live in an anarchist world or an agorist world. We're not pushing towards that per se. We just try to become as free in our own lives as we possibly can and remove the influence that the state has over us, because we recognize the state is just the modern day mafia. They're the same organization. The mafia says, hey, there's other mafias out there. You need us to protect you, so pay us our protection money. And well, what if I don't pay it? Well, then they come in with a baseball bat and break up your store. Well, what's the government do? Well, there's other governments out there, and without us, they're going to come hurt you. Well, what if I don't want to pay my taxes? Well, we'll send the IRS in and break up your store, right? It's the same thing. One is just legal and the other isn't. And that's just because governments don't like competition. And that's really it. I don't set trash cans on fire. I don't protest. I don't riot. I stay at my house and I grow tomatoes.
Right. Yeah. I think voluntarism and just um, personal autonomy. I don't even know if that's the right word, but just
Yeah.
being your own keeper, really.
Mhm.
And if people were able to do that, right, and
Yeah.
just police themselves and interact voluntarily with others and not be coerced into things, I mean, it would just be so much a better place. And I think that kind of falls into that anarcho philosophy
Yeah.
in a sense. Yeah. Um, I also wanted to have you on to talk a little bit about, EMP Shield. And I had done a few videos on EMP Shield. And I know that people in the homesteading community are not necessarily, thinking that that's something that may be a concern of theirs.
Mhm.
It's more kind of tend toward, people that are in the preparedness or prepping space. But
Sure.
from your perspective, well, before I get to that question, maybe why don't you just talk about what is an EMP, and what would happen if an EMP like happened?
Sure. An EMP is an electromagnetic pulse. We learned what they were when we were doing atmospheric nuclear testing back in the day. I think it was Operation Star Prime or Starfish or something like that. They learned that when you detonate a nuclear weapon with altitude, that it can cause this electromagnetic pulse that essentially strips the ions from the ionosphere. So it's stripped electrons coming to Earth, and they bombard your electronics, and it builds up heat over time, and that heat essentially will melt or fry things. And then they went back and started realizing that events like the Carrington event, which was it was a coronal mass ejection, that it too was essentially an EMP. It was a big burst of energy that just fried, at the time, telegraph wires. So that's what an EMP is, an electromagnetic pulse that is at the time, it was the unintended byproduct of a nuclear detonation or a massive solar eruption.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what we do know is that the world has, some years ago, entered into the realm of fourth generation warfare, which means there are now directed energy weapons. There are now EMP specific weapons, because the nations started to realize that, God, I don't want to exchange 500 missiles with another country. And then whoever happens to win that, whoever's unlucky enough to win that exchange, has to go occupy and rebuild and put back the pieces of the world that they've fractured.
Mm-hmm.
And so now there are EMP specific weapons, and there's EMPs at college campuses right now in the United States. They have, large facilities that generate this stuff so they can study it. The government has them. So on and so forth. So that's essentially what an EMP is, a big burst of energy that just fries your electronics.
Right. Well, how does an EMP shield work specifically?
Essentially what an EMP shield is, it's a super type 2 surge protector, and it's very robust, and it's not just what everybody else does. There's what I like to call a cascading series of technologies inside that box. And the only reason I know this is because I know the guys who stood the company up. I know the man that invented the technology. And so I wanted to learn more about it, and so I went there, and they had me sign their non-disclosure agreement. So I signed the NDA, and I learned all about it. And I learned from some of the most brilliant minds in the field. Some of the guys there working are guys with some pretty serious pedigree behind them. So the EMP shield is a device that you can attach to your home, your vehicle, your solar panels, whatever, and it essentially shunts overage quicker than the heat can build up. So unlike the really crappy, surge protector you buy from Walmart, this thing it's heavy, it's thick, it's weather rated, it's water rated, it's wind rated, and it's designed to absolutely shunt all that overage away.
Yeah.
So that's what it is, essentially.
Okay. I posted an install video both to YouTube and TikTok. And when I did on TikTok, I wound up getting a lot of comments. It was actually a video that got, I don't know, over 20,000 views and, quite a number of comments. And a lot of comments were very positive. People were asking a lot of questions about it. And either I would answer those questions the best that I knew how, or I would direct them to contact EMP Shield directly and get those answers, from the company themselves if it was something I felt I couldn't answer. And that's one of the things I really dig about the company, is the fact that people are available to answer those sorts of questions. So I feel cool about being an affiliate with the company. But, you know, there's a lot of people that were naysayers, you know, and
Sure.
I get that, you know, people will naysay anything when they don't really fully understand it necessarily, or they think they understand it, or they heard something about something and then they take up an opinion, or if they think that it's something that's not important to them, they're going to, you know, oh, well, you know, it's because of this or it's because of that. And I heard some people say things in the comments, not heard them, but I read comments where they would say things like, you know, just take the battery out of the car, you know, and that'll protect your car. Well, I don't know. Will that work in your opinion?
No.
Why
You
not?
have silicon based technologies in that car. What an EMP does is it bombards an entire geographical area with stripped ions. It's negative stripped ions coming down from the atmosphere. That happens whether there's a battery there or not. If batteries were all that mattered, then why did the Carrington event fry telegraph wires? That was before batteries. You know, that was back when it was very primitive technology. That was just telegraph wires, and it fried everything. It set buildings on fire because the wiring is metal, right? And as the heat builds up from those stripped electrons, because it's vibrating super fast, it will combust. It lights things on fire. You know, there were reports that came out of the Cold War that the Russians had certain devices that were so large that just the EMP alone would set entire buildings on fire because of the amount of overage it would create.
Right.
So no, it has nothing to do with batteries. In your vehicle, your battery is part of what helps with the shunting process, but that's because between it and the frame, it basically creates a capacitor. But you could have it disconnected all day and you're still taking that hit. You're still getting that overage, and that overage still builds heat over time. And that heat over time is what damages your electronics. It's what melts your circuit boards. Anything with, you know, with that silicone-based technology is going to still take that heat and melt.
What about putting it in a shipping container? Will that work?
Well, the problem is that you cannot make contact with the shipping container. So if you build a Faraday cage, and you line that container in such a way where there's no cracks, where no electrons can get through, it's sealed, and then nothing comes into contact with the metal, so you have another barrier or something in there, yes, it could in theory work. But you can spend $2,000 for a shipping container and then another $1,000 to retrofit it to make sure it's hermetically sealed, or you can spend $349 on an EMP shield and avoid the problem.
Right. How do I know that it's going to work, man? I mean, why should I believe you or me?
Well, you don't have to believe me. Dr. Will Radowski says it works, and he runs Meditech Labs on the West Coast. It's been tested. The devices have been tested at both Keystone Compliance and Meditech Labs, both of which are independent testing facilities. They use direct induction testing, and the products at EMP Shield passed both times. You know, when EMP Shield first came out, I too was a naysayer. I didn't believe it. A friend of mine, who was actually a friend of some of the other folks that are listening in tonight, told me about it. And I was like, are you kidding me? There's no way. But I had no idea. I'm not an electrical engineer. So I was convinced after reading the papers and the testing results and seeing the actual evidence. And then if you go to the company, there's a whole wall of units that get struck with lightning or overages all the time, and they work, and the company will take them and display them with a testimonial.
Right.
So there's plenty of evidence.
Yeah. Yeah, I just had some lightning outside of the house today, man. It was kind of a trip. We're kind of having a little late surge on winter here, and I guess it's welcome. I'm kind of ready for things to start getting sunny because they kind of teased us for about 2 weeks, and then we've had like winter for the last week, but we were having like lightning all around. And I was thinking about that, you know, like, man, if you know, I get hit, then I don't know. It's not probably very likely that it's, you know, I mean, you get struck by lightning. It's not like it's a super common thing, but it does happen. So,
what's more likely, an EMP or lightning? I mean, at the end of the day, lightning strikes. There's a lift station in Jackson County, Kansas. It's rural water district number 1. When a year and a half ago, I met the guy who runs it. His name is Greg, and they had bought one of the EMP shields, a 3-phase device, and put it on one of their lift stations. It took a direct lightning stroke, saved a $65,000 pump, 1,200 people didn't have to go on a boil order. They didn't even know they'd been struck by lightning. The service continued. The only reason they knew is they went to do PMs a week later, and the thing was hanging off the wall with a char mark up the side of the cinder blocks from where the potting in the device had sprayed when it, got hit by the lightning. I just took them a third unit.
Right.
So they're putting them on everything because they know it works for lightning. And if for no other reason you're putting a $349 magic box on your house, that's cheaper than your homeowner's insurance. So,
right. I haven't, I'm an affiliate. I haven't sold a whole bunch of them. I'm not really in the prepping space. I think you probably have a little bit more interest in that for people that are preppers and thinking that, an EMP is possible or whatever. But from the homesteading perspective, how do you think that, does it help, the homesteader to be concerned or to think about this technology?
Sure. Lightning is still a big deal. And if you're a homesteader, it means you're pretty frugal to begin with. It means you're into saving money. It means you're, in some cases, maybe spending more money on your infrastructure than somebody who just has a house and watches football all day. You're going to have an electric pump on your well. You're going to have a solar panel. You're going to have electricity run to your outbuildings. You're going to have all these things, right? You might have an electric gate coming onto your property. You have a house that you probably have your canning equipment in and your freeze dryers and your freezers or whatever. All of those things require electricity. And whether you're grid tied or independent with a solar system, the fact of the matter is that lightning is a very real threat. Millions upon millions of dollars of stuff is damaged every year by lightning. Potentially, I would say even billions of dollars worth of stuff is damaged constantly. Mm-hmm. Think about the homesteader who has a tractor. Let's say he's got 40 acres and part of his homesteading is he does, whatever. And he has anything from, beans to corn to whatever. That tractor, 9 times out of 10, is the tallest thing on that field. Tractors get hit all the time. Combines get hit all the time. Silos get hit all the time. That machine that they use when you're going down the highway and you see that big white condom looking thing stretched out over a pile of whatever on the side of the road, the machine that wraps all that silage or that grain or those hay bales generates incredibly large amounts of static electricity. Combines generate an enormous amount of static electricity. And it's not uncommon for these things to get hit by lightning.
Right.
So if you can take a 12-volt EMP shield for $389 minus, I'm assuming you have a discount with your code that gets people $50 off. You put it on, and if you get struck by lightning, you're saved. That's very much a homesteading thing. The water pumps and the solar systems, all of that can be protected. So even if you don't care about EMP, even if you're not a prepper, there's no reason that you can't spend that kind of little cash to protect something when it's been absolutely proven to work against lightning.
Yeah, I think it's a reasonable and prudent thing to consider for sure. Small piece of insurance, for something that,
Sure.
is not like a certainty, but if it happens, you're going to wish you had it for sure,
Well, speaking of the insurance part, this is something else homesteaders will be interested in. EMP Shield's products come with a standalone insurance policy. Again, you buy the crappy one from Walmart and it doesn't work. You can't just call the company and make a claim against their insurance. You have to contact your homeowner's insurance, pay your deductible, haggle with them for God knows how long it takes to get a resolution. And then maybe they'll pay you something. And then after that, then you have to go to the company after your first set of insurance claims have been made. And that's when the Siemens and the other products will potentially pay out. EMP Shield has a standalone $25,000 replacement policy per device. You don't have to go to your homeowner's insurance first. You don't have to pay your deductible. If you put this on your house, your car, whatever, and it doesn't work, you contact the company. They put you directly in touch with their insurance company, who has the only policy on the market that covers lightning, by the way. Everybody else classifies it as an act of God.
Right.
And you get paid if it doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah. There's like a bunch of them that have actually, they've actually worked, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I have seen physically hundreds of these things that have been struck by lightning. In fact, not too far from the factory here in Kansas where they're made, a vehicle was struck by lightning not too long ago, several months ago. Big scorch mark on the top of the car. Everything worked except for one tail light after the strike. So we bought them a tail light and mailed it to them. And the gal was actually a little bit upset about it, because if it wasn't for the EMP shield on her car, she would have gotten a new car from the insurance company. But it tells you it works, right?
Right.
You know,
Yeah, that's for sure, man. I think that's a really good thing that that's what I like about, personally just doing business with companies where you can actually get a human being on the other end of the line. And then it's not a big process to reap a claim if a claim needs to be, sought after. So that's super cool.
Yep.
Yeah, let's switch gears, man. Let's talk a little bit about what's happening on your homestead. I'm kind of interested to know what you've got going on. Last time we talked, you were working on some things, and yeah, what's the new and latest and greatest thing you got going on?
Well, this year I've doubled my garden, and I've added quite a few more plants to the repertoire. Admittedly, forever I was in the prepping space, and the homesteading portion of this came over the last 6-7 years or so, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But I've doubled the space of the garden. I've planted more plants this year. We now have a flock of almost 20 birds. We have ducks and geese, eggs for days, and goose eggs. Oh my gosh. If you've never had a goose egg, it's the same as 4 big duck eggs, and duck eggs are delicious. So we have plenty of protein. We have plenty of produce. I've added a water collection system this year. I purchased 5 of those big 275-gallon IBC totes. And so I've got one on the duck pen now that's going to start collecting water just from the duck pen, so I can give the ducks water. I have one on my garden, and I have 3 on the back side of the house as a insurance policy, just water, just in case, right?
Rain catchment?
Yep.
Yeah. So you've got it all pre-plumbed and everything coming off your gutters and into those?
Filter system and an overflow system. So when the IBC totes fill up, it goes back to the regular downspout, all that kind of stuff. I've been making lots of improvements on the house. I put in new windows last year. This year I'm painting more of the inside and outside and replacing boards and just making it, a better home. And I try to make it very pretty. From the front of my house, I want it to look like it may be a hobby farm, Yeah. But there's plenty of business in the backside of it where it is. So that's what I've been doing on my property.
Yeah. How do you manage that? How do you deal with the, trying to stay on top of that, man? Like, because you work full time, right?
Yeah, I have a full-time job. I almost have a second full-time job. I do a lot of collaboration with a lot of different folks. Tags in here. Midwest Preparedness is in here. Jules and a few others, Skane's Girl, Chuck Peoples. I'm working right now with a group in Kentucky called Kentucky Sustainable Living. I think you might be going out there in the fall.
Yeah.
They call me probably once a week asking about how to put on shows, how to monetize things, how to do it correctly, where you actually provide, value. So as far as time, I go to bed and I get up early, and then I just deal with life one day at a time.
Yeah.
And my mantra for the last few years, really since 2020, was just don't be stagnant. Move today, move tomorrow, and just keep moving.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm interested in, in hearing what people have to say on that, because I think we all deal with time management in different ways, and we all have different commitments and different levels of, things that are happening in our lives. And personally for me, it's a lot easier because I'm retired. So I get up and I do what I want to do. I work around here because I want to work around here, because I think it's important for me to do so. And I get to pick and choose that. But yet at the same time, it feels like a lot of times, I'm spinning my wheels, man. It feels like I'm just like not getting anywhere, although I know I am, because I've got all this time to devote to it. So it's just kind of interesting to realize that I was in that position at one point too, where I had kids in the house, and, it was just a much different atmosphere and a different point in your life. And so when you're doing it, it's just like you're doing it and you don't realize you're doing it. But when you step back in my position where I'm retired, I get up and do what I do. And yet it still seems like I don't have enough time. You know, I like to know how other people manage themselves, you know?
It probably helps that I was Army for almost 2 decades. So time management's pretty easy for me. Where the real conflict there comes in is getting other people to meet your time management expectations, you know, because you're used to just go, 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 go. And you pre-plan your day like weeks in advance and you just keep going and you never just get stagnant. Right. And then not everybody who's lived that lifestyle quite understands that.
Right.
And so that's really the balancing of personalities is probably more crazy than the balancing of time, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What we talked about this a little bit when we were in Tennessee, you know, on the community aspect of it, but I wanted to get your take on it again for anybody who might be, I guess, concerned about trying to build community. And since you have so much experience in doing that in you know, many years, what's your take on what's the best way to build community? If somebody were concerned, like, hey, I want to have more of a, what had happened there with my screen? That was weird. If I want to have more of, you know, kind of a community group established, how would I go about doing that?
Well, I would say that there's probably important things, not better things. I don't know that the term what's the best way to do it works because everyone's different. But I mean, the underlying foundational thing is you have to get out there and meet people. I mean, you're not going to have a community if you're so scared of your own shadow or scared of people knowing you grow tomatoes and have a water filter on your house that you won't leave your house. And that's probably the biggest hurdle that preppers and homesteaders both come into, right? Both of them realize that what they own and what they hold has value. And because we do live in the modern world and all you get pumped into your head is the crap on the news, people are scared to let other people know what they do. And I think that's really the hurdle. You have to become an introvert, as my buddy Patrick says. You have to be an introvert or you're an introvert living in an extrovert's world. We all have a level of secrecy. We all have a level of things we do and say that we don't want others to necessarily know about, but we have to be willing to get out there and meet folks or there is no community, you know? And around me, I am very lucky and fortunate. There are micro communities all around me. And I happen to be very good friends with folks in all of them. And the reason I am is because I put myself out there. You know, starting back in 2011, I started the Kansas Prepper Expo with some friends. And then we morphed that into Full Spectrum Preparedness. And now I'm part of Midwest Preparedness. And along the way through all those organizations, I have met hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, but there's a core of them that also believe in the concept of going out there and putting yourself out there and letting people know what you do. And they will gravitate in. Once they're there, then you just have to start getting through the nuances of the differences in personalities and just kind of figure it out, you know?
Right. And that's where I was going to lead into next is, you know, now that you've got a collection of people that you're, you know, in this group with, what's the biggest hurdle to getting cohesion amongst the group? What's the biggest challenge with regard to peopling?
I'm going to take a chapter out of Tag's book on this one because he put it the best. In fact, if you go to his channel on Life Done Free, he has a series of videos about community, which I was lucky enough to take place in those videos. And it's the difference between sovereignty and governance. And he put it that way during those videos we did. And I thought it was really smart that he put it that way. That's the thing, is you have to balance sovereignty and governance because we all want to be sovereign. Everybody here is fiercely independent. We all think we're the smartest guy in the room at some point of our lives. And we probably all still do to a degree. But when you come together to form a community, you have to find a way to slay that ego just enough to where you become dependent and responsible to everybody else within your circles. And it's the folks who go out and try to become demigods, you know, and try to create these weird, you know, almost pyramidish, prepper communities. Like there was some that came out on YouTube years ago, and they were like openly recruiting. And when you looked into them, it was just an MLM with preppers slapped all over it, right? So balancing sovereignty and responsibility and community is certainly the big hurdle.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think that's a big challenge. And I also think that the knowing what the reason why is, and we all have our own individual reasons why we want to be a part of a group. But I think once you become a part of that group, it's very helpful to have a common kind of understanding of how we're all in this together and how we're moving forward as a group, not necessarily as a bunch of individuals or individual clans. You have to have a common purpose, and the reason why, I think, is a big one. And I think Tag actually spoke to that in that latest video that he did. That was the one where he kind of gave the 30,000 foot view. I thought that was a very good video. And I watched that. I actually watched it a couple of times because there's a lot of nuggets in there. And I think it's just important, I think, for anybody maybe looking to establish themselves in a community, just to kind of understand that, because there's a lot of nuance with regard to people. And there's a lot of different challenges that result, like you say, when you bring together a bunch of different personalities and ideas. There's going to be a difference in opinion. And unless you kind of have that understanding of the reason why you're doing something, it's very easy to become distracted.
It is. And that's particularly true in the preparedness community, because the preparedness community is made up of some other factions. You have gun culture and love guns, own guns, have no problem with guns, very, very pro-gun. But let's face it, gun culture is toxic as shit. Like, you go into a forum with gun people and you would think these people were fighting each other, not the other side. They're so toxic to each other. Then you have the military guys, and I fell into this category for a while, right? The military guys who are like, oh yeah, I've seen the world's fallen to shit, I need to do something and build a group. But all they want to do is build another army, right? Because that's what they're used to. And as a former military guy, I'll tell you, military guys are toxic as shit, just like gun culture. And then you have the weird preppers, right? The ones who think that they're going to survive the third global catastrophe of floods and ice storms or whatever. And these are the guys who, no offense to anybody in the chat, but they're all overweight. They're all middle-aged. They all sit behind a computer all day. They don't do anything except for complain about politics and stacked beans and rice. And then you have this weird trifecta of these different types of people that are all in the preparedness community. So you try to put a bunch of them in a room together and come up with some form of governance and try to come up with some form of commonality. It gets weird quick.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah. It's interesting because, like, we all to one extent or another, as you alluded to, I mean, we think we know what's best, right?
Right.
Everybody here thinks they know what's fucking best.
Sure.
Right. You wouldn't be doing it if you didn't think it was the right thing to do.
Yep.
Or you had, you're doing it a certain way because, hey, that's the way I learned it and that's what I know and it's the way to do it. Right. But
right.
Right.
Yeah, but none of us realize that the smartest people on the planet maybe know 1% of 1% of 1% of all there is to know. Who the fuck are we? Right. Like, just because I've done something for 20 years and it worked doesn't mean it's the only way to do it. But none of us think of things in those terms. We're like, well, this is the only way because I've never blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
Okay, cool. But what about the guy next door to you who's been doing something completely different? And he too hasn't had a catastrophe befall him. And that's where you got to kill that ego.
I've said that for so many years, I mean, it's a very overused cliche, but there's many ways to skin the same old cat, know, and it's just the way I look at things because I do things my own way and I take from what others do and I modify it a little different to suit me. And that's what we're all doing in essence. None of us are like fucking geniuses where we're making this stuff up, right? We're all taking from someone else.
We're just lucky. That's what we are. At the end of the day, everything we try, even if we were taught it by somebody else, we're lucky because there's lots of things that could befall the best plans. And what do they say about war plans? It doesn't last 5 minutes into contact with the enemy. You could be the smartest dude and have the perfect schematic and the perfect plan and the perfect group and all this, and then that one thing happens and it derails all of it.
Yeah. I it's an interesting thing, man. People are, I think, our biggest challenge in anything we do. And this is something I learned over time, and I learned it more so once I became a little higher up in the organization, where I became more of a supervisor and less of one of the people out there just pulling hose and fighting fire, right?
Right.
But that's the largest part of our job, is peopling. 95% of what I did as a firefighter was managing people, whether that be people that are civilians or people that are my peers or subordinates. It's all peopling. 5% of what I did was fighting fire and going to wrecks and fires and everything else. It's just an
Right.
interesting thing that's the biggest challenge we all have, I think. So that's why I wanted to just chat about that a little bit, because you've been in that prepper space and dealing with groups and things for quite some time. So
It's very true, man. And once you realize you're not the smartest guy in the room, it becomes a little easier to take that criticism. But man, we're dudes. That shit's hard. We're not wired to take the criticism. We're wired to get defensive. We really are.
Right. So do you drive the bus, man? Huh? Are you a bus driver, or how do you run things?
Are you talking about in my group?
Yeah.
I've been in multiple leadership roles. My group has mostly military guys in the beginning. So we had a military style. We have commander and executive officer. Those are the terms we use. And I have been the executive officer almost the entire time the group's been in existence, with one exception. We have terms. We have elections. We try to get people to rotate through, so everybody has to taste a little bit of the responsibility. We've been around for 17 years. My group has, we're very, very close knit because we've been doing it a very long time together. And at the beginning, we were that militaristic group. We were, you want to fucking survive, do what the hell you're told, follow me. We were that command hand. My best friend and I, he was an officer. I was an NCO in the Army, and we were just used to barking and people jumping. And then when you try to do that in the civilian world, man, it does not work out well. It does not work out well. You try that shit here, man, you're going to get hit. You know what I mean? Like, people will hit you over that. So yeah, I drive the bus. I've been at the top of the pyramid. I've been in the middle of the pyramid. I kind of like being somewhere in between. When I was in the Army, I was pretty well I was an NCO, so I ran platoons worth of guys. I would run 45 dudes at a time. Military police officers and medics is what I did. So I was very used to being part of the command structure, but I was never the guy at the absolute top. I was never an officer, and I was never the first sergeant or the sergeant major, right? So I was an E4, E5, E6 in different leadership roles. And so that's where I like to find myself, is in mid-tier management, where I have just enough authority to make sure that certain jobs get done correctly, but not enough authority to where I ever feel as though I'm in charge of people. Because it's once you translate all that from Army talk into civilian talk, it's basically you have to serve in order to lead. And it's a completely different mindset than it is in the military. You have to serve to lead. And if you can't serve, you have no business being in leadership ever. So it's you have to see leadership for the burden it is, and not for the privilege you wish it was, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an important thing to think about, for sure. Yeah. So what's your biggest concern, Bobby? I mean, like, there's a lot of things happening from the standpoint of you've been preparing for many, many years, and I'm sure your preparedness concerns have evolved over time. But like right now, with what's happening currently, what's your greatest concern moving forward? Geopolitically or locally, or
Sure.
however you want to identify that, just your biggest concern.
I think that the biggest concern is kind of an amalgam of several, and it's the days of the United States being the global leader are waning. And it doesn't matter where you stack up on whether that's good or bad. What matters is that you recognize that as the United States, less and less so on the geopolitical spectrum, is seen as the global leader and the global force for good, and it's seen more as the perpetuator of violence in the military-industrial complex, whatever, that will lead to instability at home, and that will lead to financial rust here. And I think that the folks at the top of that pyramid know how to monetize that. And I think we're going to see that ultimately in the form of central digital banking currency. And I don't know how that's going to flesh itself out. I don't know that it's going to be as drastic as the prepper porn guys want it to be. But if I had to guess, within 5 years, you're going to wake up one day realizing you are no longer in the world that you once thought you knew. And you're going to look on the ingredient package of your favorite granola bar and realize it's made of crickets. And you're going to realize that it cost you 97 CBDC units or whatever, and realize what in the fuck has gone on. What happened? Because they're slow turning this thing up. They've been planning this. Whoever you want to assign as they have been cooking this up for a long time. Because I'm convinced at the turn of the last century with World War I, and then into World War II, they started to realize it's not as financially advantageous to level entire continents. Right now, we have to be a little more surgical, and we have to worry about economics more, and we'll use war to drive economics. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing that we have to worry about, because it's going to encompass all of it. You know, the CBDC is going to encompass financial collapse. It's going to encompass tax reform. It's going to encompass the destruction of the political system in this country. It's going to encompass war. All those other things are satellites or ancillary problems of the main problem. And the main problem is that I believe there is a diabolical group of assholes who want to run the world. They want to control the whole damn thing. And they're willing to hurt you and your family to do it. And you're going to become very poor as a result.
You know, I was having a little bit of that conversation today with a family member. And the interesting thing about what you just said there is, if you had said that in 2019, I would have just been shaking my head going, yeah, I don't know, dude. I don't know, bro. Whatever, you know, like, okay. But I think there's a lot of possibility of that, just given, you know, how we've seen how they've accelerated the out of control spending and the lack thereof about doing anything about it. You know, and I think that there's something on the horizon. What that is and when it happens, I don't think any of us know. But I guess the next question is what do we do about it?
Increase your ungovernable score. And that's something you can talk to Tag about from A Life Done Free. Do everything you can to remove as much control over your life as possible, as much as you possibly can. You know, again, the best laid plans, you know, we can all have great water catchment systems and great gardens and a basement full of beans, bullets, bacons, and bullion, but that's no guarantee. So you have to look past the guarantee. Do what you can today to be as free as possible and shore up your financial stability for tomorrow. And do it in a way where, if you are lucky and you make it through, that you can pass that legacy to your children.
So what does that look like? Go ahead.
I say, past that, there's no reason to do any of it.
Right. What does that look like for you? What is that thing that is looming out there that you need to take care of? What's number one?
Be 100% debt free.
Okay.
And here's the thing, whether it's an EMP that wipes out the electronics, or it's a war, or it's a financial upheaval, or it's a cyber attack, is inconsequential. They, whoever you want to label them as, the lizard people, whatever, Godzilla, aliens, I really don't care. Wearing my confessional shirt because, well, it's all possible, right? I don't care who you want to label them as, but they now know, and they've known for probably decades, how to make sure no matter what happens, they will always have a record of what you owe and to who. You know, this isn't like the Fight Club movie. You blow up the buildings and it sets everything back to zero. It's not going to be that way, man. These people at the top of the pyramid have databases on top of databases on top of databases and backups upon backups. So if you can retain your title to your home, not owe a car payment, not have credit card debt, not have medical debt, as much as humanly possible, you get as debt-free as possible, and then start working with that extra money to becoming utility-free. However, right, I think that's how you do it. Because look, we're not going to escape the beast. You know, the devil has many plans, and none of us are bigger than the devil, right? Again, fill in the blank. I don't care what you call that. So if you prep with this super weird prepper porn thing where you're going to defeat the Illuminati and bring down the lizard people and bring peace to Earth, you're going to fail. So don't prep like that. Don't prep with that stupid Nat Geo mindset. You got to prep understanding this is so that my family can eat for 6 months. When the thing happened in 2020 and everybody was running to Walmart because apparently the only way to deal with a respiratory virus was to buy ass wipe and hoard toilet paper, I didn't need any because I had some. And when the price of everything jumped up, 18% by the mid 2020s, when everything was happening, and then into 2021, when the shipping crises were making it where nothing in your supermarket had food anymore, it didn't matter for me. And it didn't matter for a lot of the folks I know because we had a year's worth of food in our basement and because we grew our own food and we raised our own food, and it did not matter. It didn't matter when gas went to $3.80 a gallon. We carpooled because we had networks, we had friends, and if we all worked in the same general areas, we carpooled together and everyone threw in a little, right? That's what you have to do. And I believe that's what, Tag means when he says become ungovernable. The state will always be there. It will always be there. They will always be there. You just negate them enough in your life to where if they decide to do some other weird thing, guess what? It doesn't matter that much.
Yeah. That's super important, man. I agree like so much with what you just said there. I think it's, I also think I see Jules says that he's only got one more debt item. Good on you, man. Jules. Good on you. That's awesome. I think one of the things too we need to think about is just looking at ways we can incorporate all that sort of stuff together. All the stuff that you just talked about, and it's a very difficult thing to do because people, I think, tend to be very reactionary. They look at things like, oh, nothing's happened my entire life, right? It's that normalcy bias. Nothing's just another day. And we kind of just mutter on through life and kind of waiting for something to happen. And then when it happens, people are very reactionary. So I think we can, if we at all see that there's some things we need to work on, it's super important that we do that. And that's one of the things that, I've been able to really change in how I've managed my life in the past few years is just recognizing those things and moving toward them, because I'm so much better off now, quite honestly.
Sure.
I just got off the phone. What?
Turn off the news.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
you're not going to learn anything, and all you're going to get is anxiety. Turn that shit off and go plant some tomatoes.
Yeah, that was an episode. That was one of my favorite Spearco episodes ever. Was turn off the freaking news, and it just kind of opened my eyes because at that time I was still into the the daily political bullshit. Right? You just get sucked into it, and it's easy to do. I understand. You get forced into choosing a side and whatever. But when you do that, and then it's just so empowering. I mean, there's entire things that happen that I have no fucking idea that happened. I get to the end of the year or somebody will say, hey, do you remember this? And I'm like, what? No, I didn't even hear that. But see, the thing is it doesn't matter that I heard it or not because it's so inconsequential. Right. Even though it's something that somebody's talking about for the moment and consuming, their mental energy, it means nothing. Another good one is you get to the end of the year and then they start playing all the dead people, all the dead celebs,
Yeah.
right? And you're like, fuck, that person died? Wow.
Right.
I don't watch
Oh,
the
it happens
news.
in threes. Ah.
Right. Yeah. And it's one of those things that's like, when you can do that, that's so empowering to like remove yourself from that and just work on you.
Right.
You
Be
know?
the best you that you can be, and the other stuff doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that what happens over in Europe right now might not affect you. It certainly will. It will affect
Sure.
your pocketbook because of shipping and, embargoes and rules and whatever. But if you have stuff that's there ready for you, and you have a multi-faceted approach to this, where it's not just prepping or just homesteading or just owning guns, but it's kind of a mix of all of it,
Mm-hmm.
you tend to not notice. It's like
Right.
the EMP shield on that building, man. When the lightning hit, they didn't even know.
Right.
And that's how it is with a true preparedness mindset, is when things happen, you don't even know.
Yeah. Yeah. You point out that we should be keeping track of the things that are going on. And that's certainly very, very important. You don't want to be going through life with your head in the sand. But the reality for me is that I'm going to hear about shit that's important for me to hear about, because enough people listen to the news where I'm going to hear about it.
Right.
Hey man, did you hear about this? This is happening. And then I'll
Right.
be like, oh, okay. Yeah. Let me look into that. And then it's like, yeah, I probably need to pay attention to that. But otherwise it just doesn't fucking matter.
It doesn't. Unless it trickles down to your local co-op or your local Tractor Supply or your local Walmart, it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. You're not stopping it.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably my biggest drawback with the preparedness movement early on, was it was all conspiracy theory stuff. And we all love it. We all like talking about it. It's prepper gossip. It's
Right.
like that Real Housewives of Orange County, but for white dudes with beards, right? It's conspiracy shit. That's what we love. And we all love to sit around and discuss what the favorite theory is. But at the end of the day, my biggest heartburn with the conspiracy theories isn't whether you believe them or not, because I certainly believe in my fair share of them. It's the fact that it creates these bad guys that are so overwhelmingly large, that are so insurmountable, that it literally inspires inaction. Well, I can't do shit about it, Well, okay, you're right. You can't change what happens in the thrones of power, but you can certainly change what the throne of power has over you.
Yep. Right here. Right there.
Grumpy.
Start a revolution, plant a garden. That's what you can do.
Yeah.
Things that you can actually do. So yeah, I totally agree with that. That's yep. I keep track of things going on without the lamestream media. I share what I think is important for people to know. Yeah. Yeah. Certainly keep the people that are in your circle apprised of things that might, be impactful to them. But I just think that there's so much. It's just an interesting thing, man. People are so interesting. I really should have got more interested in studying psychology, because I think it's just a fascinating thing, people and how we think about things and the things that influence us, and all of that. It's just so fascinating to me.
100%.
But hey man, let me ask you this: vodka or bourbon?
Bourbon. Bourbon. I'm a brown liquor guy.
Any favorites?
Makers. Love Makers.
Maker's Mark.
Yep. But because I have 4 children and a grandchild, I don't get to drink Maker's Mark. So I mix Seagram 7 with cranberry juice and call it good. But yeah, I will drink vodka if someone has it and they offer me a glass. I'm not going to turn it down. But I am much more of a bourbon guy myself. Bourbon, whiskey, Scotch, all the brown liquors, I like them.
Yeah, Maker's Mark, is that expensive? I'm not really familiar. I mean, I've seen it and heard,
This bottle right here, I want to say was probably like $30,
Oh, no kidding.
And this is my one in my office. It's not even open. It's just there next to my tumblers because I want to look like Don Draper from Mad Men and have my little corner, even though I don't ever open it while I'm at work. But
yeah, man, that's super good. Yeah, I'm gonna have to get a little bit more little culture if I'm gonna be having a sip now and then with Bobby Spags, I guess. I don't know.
You did fine at SRF. We sat around and sipped and had a great time.
Yeah, I know. That was fun, man. We'll have to do that again. I'm looking forward to it for sure.
For sure.
Yeah. So what's next for you?
Oh, it just depends on what area. Working to get the fall Midwest Preparedness Festival put together. I've got a ton of the work on it done already between myself and Patrick and Tag and a few others. We got most of the work done. It's just a matter of fine tuning. We're trying to get things to the point where each show makes the next one fine tuned more and more to where it just takes, it's no longer work. It's something else. It's its own beast. So that's coming up. There's a couple of potential shows in the prepper sphere that I might be lining up to go to, as a bunch of us from the Kansas Coalition are probably going to start going to a lot of these things together. So there's some potential shows coming up. Like I said, I'm working with the guys at Kentucky Sustainable Living a little bit, giving them some consulting on the side of, what to do to make, their event really good.
Mm-hmm.
We had a really good conversation with them the other night. They've got a lot of cool shit that they're planning. Trying to work with the folks out there in Kiowa, Colorado. Went to one of their events last year. It was really good, and they're working to put one together, I think, again this fall. And so I'll be working with them. And then just doing my consulting gig on the side, working with the EMP Shield a little bit, working in my own company a little bit, just doing a little of this, a little of that. I really don't like to be nailed down to just one thing or two things. I have prepper ADD, I guess you could say, where I just like to cast a wide net.
Yeah. Yeah. Stick and move, right?
Yeah. I don't like being stagnant.
Yeah. I don't blame you. I'm kind of the same way. I get pretty bored very, very easily. Yeah. I guess I'm a polymath, I suppose.
All right.
I like to do different things, little of this, little of that. I'm not really good at any of it, but I can hold my own in a lot of areas. But
we're good enough the wives can blame us when it blows up.
Yeah, man. Gosh, damn it. It's like sun shining out there. I'm stoked about that. I might be able to get out and do some more work once we're off here.
All of a sudden, like we
had
no real spring this year. It was cold, rainy, cold, windy. 70s, really nice.
Yeah.
Cold, rainy, 90 degrees. I'm like, man.
Huh.
There was no.
Did you guys have much of a tornado season back there?
No,
That's good.
We had some thunderstorms roll through a couple of weeks ago, and they were pretty good storms. But I honestly think that Tornado Alley has moved. I don't think that my part of Kansas anymore really gets hit the way it would have maybe 20, 25 years ago. In fact, I've only ever seen one tornado in Kansas, and it was in 1989 or 1990.
Huh.
I've seen the aftermath of many tornadoes in Kansas. Greensburg and Lawrence and a few other places got hit over the last few decades. But it's like so rare anymore that when it does happen, it's a big story. But over, further east and further west, and then down in Oklahoma, much different story. It seems like Tornado Alley has just kind of shifted with all the weird weather patterns that are happening right now.
Right. Well, that's a good thing, man. I mean, it's not good for where it's shifting or whatever, because it's still an issue, I think. But yeah, I don't know. I know that people that are like Midwest, they like, yeah, California, they get those earthquakes and wildfires, and then we're out here going, man, those goddamn tornadoes,
Tornadoes.
But I think it's just what you're used to, Yeah, that night we were at SRF, and that storm was coming through. You guys were cracking jokes and shit like it was funny, and I'm like looking around going, man, what's happening here?
Oh, I know, it was hilarious. Oh, Grumpy, yes.
Yeah, we'll do that, G, for sure. I'll be in on that. That's what you're referring to, Tech or Bobby?
Yeah. Got to get back to work. Going to put you two on the spot. Conflicted live mid-June. Yeah,
just reach out, man.
He's been trying to get me to do that for so damn long, and honestly, I did so many lives, and I think half my lives were with Grumpy. Him and I have a great time when we get on the camera, but it was to the point where, gosh, man, my evenings were just getting so full. And the work, doesn't stop. And it was getting to the point where I'm like, man, I gotta pull back on these lives for a while and get shit done around the house in the evenings and stuff. So he's been trying to get me back on, and I'm like, yeah, maybe. But yeah, him and I talked at Midwest Preparedness. I'm like, fine. especially because he said you were going to be there. Tag was going to be there. I think he said Local Prepper was going to be on there.
Yeah.
And I love Local Prepper. He's one of my favorite prepping shows or channels on YouTube because he's just a no bullshit dude. And he's just going to tell you the way he feels that things are. And he does really good product reviews. So if your guys are folks, if you're in the thing and you want a good small prepping channel that's not the bullshit, no conspiracies, no tinfoil, go check out Local Prepper.
Yeah.
I think he's going to be on the same thing with you, me, and Grumpy, and I think Tag's going to be there. It'll be a badass panel.
Yeah, right on. What do you think, man? Do you think I should take a little bit more tinfoil on my channel? Do you think I should become a little more like out there with harmful content, or what do you think? Which direction do you think I should go? Am I not doing enough daily briefs, or what do I need?
Oh my gosh. No, I don't think you should, because you have a brand and you should stay true to that. The reason I love your channel is because it's not Local Prepper. And the reason I love Local Prepper is because it's not Tag from Life Done Free. And the reason I love Tag from Life Done Free is because it's not Grumpy. And I love Grumpy because it's not. And I could keep going, right? Every channel that I enjoy watching brings a unique perspective. Mm-hmm. And if we all try to shift and do what someone else is doing, all you're doing is chasing the dragon. At that point, you might as well fucking be on heroin. You're never going to catch it. Just be you.
Yeah,
man.
I know. It's kind of an interesting thing. You know, I look at some of the other channels and, you know, that's fine, man. Make money however you make money, or do whatever you do. It's all good, right? Everybody has a place where they fit into this ecosystem, I guess, if you will. And it's, you know, I look at some of the channels that put out that content that's the fear.
Yeah.
And it's content that is only going to be for the moment. And they get a lot of clicks. They get a tremendous amount of people interested in that because so many people want to see the train wreck, or they want to hear about the whatever. And I don't know. It's one avenue and one way to go. I just don't see a lot of value for people that may want to listen to my channel. And so I tend to, you know, put out what I put out, but nothing against any other channels. It's just, you know, I was just kind of being facetious and asking you, should I?
Great,
yeah.
The reason I came to love your channel and reached out to be your friend in the first place was because you did the chicken stuff, or your chicken coop. You did the little thing that you and I talked with some comments about your water nipples that you were using. And I was asking
you
all that and your biochar stuff. And I'm like, this guy's got an 8-minute video on biochar. Anywhere else I go to learn about biochar is like 74 hours worth of some dude droning on about the minutia of it. And here's Eric over here just like, boom, this is how you do it. And I'm like, I could do that. I can absolutely do that because now I've seen how to fucking do it. So no, don't change the thing, man.
Right on. Yeah, it's super simple. That's actually like my best video. That video right there. It's doing pretty well. It gets a lot of.
I wonder why. A
lot of traction on that video. So it's cool. And that's what I want to try to create is evergreen content. I want content that somebody will be able to find value in it 5 years from now, instead of like, you know, putting out some bullshit that was news today, but gone tomorrow, you know?
Right. Yeah. There's plenty of that. There's plenty of the news reporting channels. I have no interest in that. I don't even watch any channel. There's some really good ones out there.
Yeah.
Some really good channels that just talk about the news. And frankly, I'm bored with it. I don't care.
Right. Hey, I don't know if you remember that video I did on my water system where I tapped into and kind of did a little off-grid water searching. And I haven't really done another follow-up video to that, but I'm in the process now of, I had ordered a tank and it was 3,000 gallon tank. I got that on the way. But yesterday I actually tested my water flow. When I did it initially in the summertime, I was getting 77 gallons a day on that initial thing, which I equated out to be about 27,000 gallons in a year that I would get on this secondary water source.
Right.
I tested it last night. And now, of course, we're in winter or whatever. So there's more water in the, you know, in the underground and wherever it's coming up or whatever. But I was able to get out a 5-gallon bucket in 20 minutes.
Nice.
So that's 360 gallons a day.
Yeah.
That means that's 3,600 gallons in 10 days.
Right.
That's a lot of water, man.
A lot of water.
Yeah. So I'll have that 3,000 gallon tank filled up in like 10 days. And then I got to figure out where I'm going to go from there, what I'm going to do, how I'm going to distribute it. Am I going to tie it into my existing system, or am I going to do something else with it? I was actually talking prior to getting on with you tonight. I was talking for almost an hour with Sean Mills from Hack My Homestead, and he's going to try to help me work through my solar project, because I want to be able to harness my own energy. That's a big goal of mine. Not only water, but I want that amount of control over my own energy. So I'm really trying to get forward on that. But I was talking to him about that as well as my solar tonight. So I'm pretty pumped on it.
That's the way to do it, man. Just little bits at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, right on, Bobby. It's great having you on tonight, dude.
Thanks for having me back. Hopefully this one doesn't get removed.
No, I don't think we talked about anything too sketchy,
Lizard people.
I know. Those people are... How dare you?
Hi, Potpourri.
Yeah. Potpourri alive. How you doing? Right on. Let's see. With my dehumidifier, I'm getting at least 5 gallons a day, except for the last few days where it's been closer to 10 gallons. What are you referring to there? Dehumidifier. What am I missing?
A dehumidifier, you put it like in your basement where it's moist, and it pulls the moisture from the air, and then it can either tank it to your sub pump, or you can collect it in 5-gallon water. It just pulls moisture from the air.
Oh, I didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah, it's the opposite of a humidifier. You use that in the wintertime when it's dry to keep the air moist. Well, like I have a dehumidifier in my basement, and I have it right next to my sub pump, because my basement for some reason is really weird. It's warm in the summer and cold in the winter, and it's very moist.
Yeah.
Because I have old pipes in this house, old copper piping. So there's moisture, but I have it going all the time. And so it pulls the moisture from the air and then hoses it into the sub pump, so that I don't have moisture problems with things in my basement.
And so I guess you just would treat that water somehow and filter it or whatever.
Water, essentially. So if you ran it through a filter, it'd be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't know anything about that. See, we don't live in an area where we actually have water in our air. So you guys, you guys are kind of humid back there. So like it's bone dry out here in the summertime, man.
Yeah, but you live in that place where you don't even have freedom in your air. You guys are like communist light up there.
Yeah, I know. It's like choking me, man. I can't like hardly breathe. Right on. Well, cool. Anything else you want to add, Bobby, before we hop off?
Just remember that every decision in life you make is an economic decision. Treat every decision that way, and you will generally come out a little more ahead than you did yesterday.
Well, wait a minute. You elaborate on that. Like, how does that? How do you mean it's an economic decision?
Economics runs everything, and most people hear that and they think money, but you exchange in energy, you exchange in emotion, you exchange in love, you exchange in hatred, you exchange in all sorts of mediums. And if you start to look at every decision you make in life as an exchange with whoever you're making it with, about, or from, or to, and start to look at it where you don't want to ever come out on the net negative, you'll actually have a much healthier life. Generally speaking, if you look at everything you do as something where you want to create a positive, you'll start to realize how much better you feel. And then you're like, man, I want my kids to feel this way. I want my wife to feel this way. I want my neighbors to feel this way. But everything you do is still it's an exchange, right? Even so much as just a high five with a friend, you're using energy and time for that high five. And think of it this way. You see the guy from high school. You're like, hey, what's up, buddy? And you put your hand up. And they're an asshole. They leave their hand down and ghost you and leave you hanging. There's a net negative in that economic exchange of energy and time. But if you both reach up and you high five, you both come out better. You both feel better. You both are happy. You got the connection, no matter how brief, and both of you come out on a net positive. That was a positive economic exchange of energy and time. Mm-hmm. Same with money. Same with your garden. Your bartering, your whatever. Every single decision in life is an economic decision, and most people don't realize that. It's why the enemy of freedom so often tries to muddy the economic waters and use economics as a way to attack other people. It's the easiest way to do so. So if you take control of your own life and all the economic exchanges you do, regardless of what that medium of exchange is, you will bless the people with you. You will be more blessed. I think God favors people who act that way to each other in a spirit of charity and giving and love and economic abundance. And I think that those who are selfish and try to be economically stingy and only think of themselves, well, they'll get their comeuppance one way or the other.
Yeah. Yeah. Potpourri of Life says, and the positive energy doesn't mean you have to agree on everything, but supporting one another with love and care allows each other to grow.
Well, God, think of that. Imagine a world where we all agreed on everything. How fucking boring that would be. You would be drones. There'd be no life. There'd be no spark. Part of the economic exchange is the free flow of the marketplace of ideas.
Right.
And the marketplace of ideas only works when people admit they were wrong.
Yeah. You know, I was actually in Kansas a few years ago, and I'd never been there, but what I heard about Kansas, you know, it's flat. I just assumed it would be flat and just dry forever and nothing to see. And it was actually pretty nice. You know, there was like kind of like rolling hills, like as I'm driving down the freeway, and everything was like green. There was no trash or anything. And I was just like, man, this is really nice.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was going to ask you, like, what's your issue back there? Do you guys have a problem with homelessness at all?
There's some. Your audience will certainly make fun of me for this one, but I play Pokemon Go, a little app on your phone where you walk around the world and interact with augmented reality. My kids love it, so I play it with them. And I play it on my own sometimes. And a lot of times I will sit there and walk through downtown Topeka, Kansas, or Lawrence or someplace like that. And there is certainly a homeless contingent. We had some pretty large psychological hospitals here way back in the day. You had Menninger's and a few places like that. And when the Reagan administration basically did away with mental institutions as a general rule, at least in the way it was done then, a lot of people were thrown into the streets. And there is a homeless contingent in Topeka, Kansas. A good chunk of them are mentally ill. A good chunk of them are veterans. A good chunk of them, they're meth addicts, probably because they're veterans or probably because, you know, they're mentally ill. So there's some of that, but it's nothing like it is. You know, I've been to Chicago and Cincinnati and San Francisco and Boston, and even Kansas City isn't that bad. But it's not like it is in your bigger cities, but there's some of it. Yeah.
Well, what do you think how the best way to deal with something like that is?
Oh God, I don't even know that I'm qualified to answer that, because I think the homeless condition is very systemic. And in some ways, I think it's organized and planned. And you can derive from that whatever you want, I suppose. But I don't know that there's an answer. I don't know that there's ever going to be a time in human existence when humans are in charge that we will find a way to deal with poverty or homelessness or any of those things. Because every system we find ourselves under, no matter how good or enlightened it may be, or no matter how archaic and bad it might be, they're all run by people. And people are flawed. And I don't know that there's an answer to that. I don't know you'll ever have an answer to that, because certainly the egalitarian left-wing view of you know, neo-socialism claims to have the answer. And of course, the neoconservative view under Reaganomics claims to have the answer. And both of them have failed miserably, one way or the other. So I don't think that you can look at that. I don't think you can go out there and see a bunch of homeless people and say, how do we fix it? I think if you want to fix it, go get some fucking food and fix it. Go hand out some food. If you want to hand out some food, get some cases of water and hand out some water. Do what you want to do. Make an economic decision to put more good into the world than you can take. Offer jobs to people if you really feel that way about it. But then again, you have to be kind of careful. You know, it's not an easy answer. You can have all this nuance and all this charitable idea, but you're not going to fix it, man. None of us will. You can only try to lessen the effect a little bit. I mean, this will probably piss some people off, and I really don't care. But there was one year I was hanging out with a buddy of mine on a boat. We would go up and down the river, and we had cases of beer. We're sitting there drinking beer. We'd go by, and homeless camps. We'd come across a homeless camp with 3 or 4 guys with their pallet and tarp homes, and they'd see us, and they'd wave, and we'd pull over, and we'd hang out with them. We'd give them beer because, man, life sucks. Have a beer, man. You know, that's all I had on me at the time. What am I going to do? Give them a dollar bill? I'm going to give you a beer, make your afternoon just a little bit better, even if just for 30 minutes, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Some people would frown on me for that, and I really don't care, because in that moment I decided that this guy needed a beer, and he obviously wanted it. He took it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a difficult situation. It's a very thorny issue. It's one that we deal with here in California because we have a tremendous amount of homeless people here, and no matter almost where you are, it just is a problem here. Way more so than anywhere else I've ever been. When I was when I went back to Tennessee recently and I was driving, I actually was shocked that I saw one homeless person, one tent right along the freeway, kind of underpass or whatever. That's not an uncommon occurrence where I'm at. It's very common, and it's gotten so much worse over time. And it is a very difficult situation because on one hand, you know, there's those that think, oh, you can just do this, or they should just, you know, lock these people up, or they should just do this, or they should just do that, or we need to build more places for them to go, or more job outreach and all this sort of stuff. But it's way more complicated than that, because you've got people who, as you said, are mentally ill. There's people who are legitimately homeless that are out on the street due to unfortunate circumstances and are looking to get themselves help. And then there's a vast majority, or a vast number of them, are actually very able-bodied, but they just have chosen to be out on the street. And their problem is exacerbated by either mental illness or drug abuse, or a combination of the two. And so what do we do with these people, right? I personally, and again, people can assume what they want to assume and derive from that what they will, but I don't give them money. And the reason why I don't, it's not because out of compassion, because I want to help them. It's because in most cases, I don't know their situation.
Right.
If I knew your situation, and I knew you actually legitimately would elevate yourself by me giving you money, then I would be more than happy to do that.
Right.
But I don't know that giving you $5 isn't going to give you the next hit of heroin that's going to put you, you know,
it's going to kill you and leave you on the street for someone else to clean up.
Yeah.
You know?
And I see so many of these folks that they make an industry out of it. You know, they sit out there with their gas can and they don't even fucking have a car.
Right.
You know, it's just a ruse, right? Or I see the one guy that's at this place, and then he's over here, and then I see him up, you know, 30 miles north at the Costco,
charlatans
standing there, you know, and he's got a car, he's got the ability to get around and all these sort of things. So
there was some scandal some years back, if I remember correctly, where there were super wealthy people who were taking classes on being homeless. And you would have these guys and gals who came from very good means, but they had no clue what it was like to live on the other side. And they would get dirty and go up and beg for a few days, you know, just to see. And you have no idea who that person is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really interesting thing, man. I mean, like I say, when Rebecca and I did a lot of traveling, we would go places. And that's one of the things I always really like keyed in on. It's just how it looks different from where I live. Right. And it doesn't take very long for you to get out of California before you realize, like, man, it's like clean around here, dude. There's no graffiti.
Right.
There's like no homeless people like everywhere. And it's just so different, you know?
It is.
And I think that people that don't live in places like California, yeah, you know, California's beautiful. Don't get me wrong. There's places that are amazing, but it's just unfortunate to see what's kind of happened to this state. And I think it's just I don't know where we go from there, you know, because I think this problem is only going to be coming to a town near you at some point.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, a third of the homeless people live in this state, California, but it's coming to a town near you. And I think unless there's a willingness to try to actually do more than just build more facilities,
right?
I just don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, you're not going to throw money at the problem. I mean, we've certainly seen the result. In fact, a state like yours and probably a handful of others that have, you know, political leanings where the only answer is to throw ridiculous amounts of money at them. It obviously just seems to exacerbate the problem. This is what people don't understand. You can throw money at people who don't appreciate money and you will solve nothing. People who don't understand money, appreciate it, understand how it works. It would be like, giving the water of life to a zombie. They'd have no clue what to do with it.
Yeah.
There has to be a change in mindset. There has to be a spiritual and a physical transformation whereby learning can take place, or else you're just wasting your time.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I've become hardened to it. I don't like to feel be discompassionate. Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's too difficult to know people's motivations and their intentions, because I know so many of those people are very, very capable. They're healthy enough where they can go out and actually do something to better themselves, but yet they choose a life that, takes them down that road. And like I said, I think a vast majority of them are there because of their choosing. Now that there's obviously the others that unfortunate circumstances and they may be in better place. But I think it's an industry that's encouraging this, because they're actually in our town, they're building this new facility for the homeless. And it's essentially going to just attract more homeless is what it's going to do. It's going to make this hub for more homeless to come here, because there's now a facility that is going to help them in whatever fashion. They're going to be able to get their free cell phones and their, their checks and all of the stuff that's handed out. And I don't know, there may be a percentage of people that are helped, and for that I'm grateful. But at the same time, it's just like if you were to take a cat food can and put it on your front doorstep, what do you think you're going to get?
Cats. You're going to start getting cats.
You're going to start getting cats that show up to your door.
You're right. And it's the same mentality. Look, I understand that we want a healthier world, and I understand that we want a better world, and I understand that most of the people who come up with horrible fucking ideas probably have the best of intentions, and I'm not going to try to take their intention from them.
Right.
But how did we get to the point where 150 years ago, the nuns and the priests would go out into the street and feed people? And from there, we've gone to, well, let's do a needle exchange program because they're going to shoot up anyway. And let's make sure they're at least not getting hepatitis while killing themselves on heroin. Like, what are you solving there other than, okay, now there's no hepatitis with 5 people, but you're not stopping anything. You're just rerouting it to something else, and you're enabling in the name of helping. And that's not going to solve any problems either.
Right. Yeah. It's a thorny issue, man. I just thought I'd throw that out there just because I know you live in a place where you don't typically see that sort of thing as much as maybe I'm accustomed to.
Yeah. Nothing like what's out there.
And it's just changed here. I mean, this has been probably in the last, it's accelerated in the last 5 years, but probably in the last 10 years. 10 years ago, you really didn't see, you saw that our normal, like people that were kind of out in the community that had mental disability or whatever, you'd see those people kind of wandering around and stuff, but everybody knew those people. Now you just see people showing up, they're just
I think that there's a concerted effort on certain parties' part to import it because it collapses.
Yeah.
It collapses the paradigm. It collapses so they can rebuild. And I have no doubt that there's ulterior motive in some places, yours in particular being one of them, where homelessness is an import business for political gain.
Yeah. What's up, Jason? Good to see you in the chat.
There he is. There's the guy we were talking about earlier.
That's right. We were talking shit about you.
Kentucky, the only thing they got good is the chicken.
Yeah, man. Cool. Well, right on, man. I hate to leave on such a downer, man. That's kind of a bummer topic right there. What was that all about? Who brought that shit up? Huh?
I don't know. Hey, you know what? Homesteading is not harmful content.
That's right. Who's running this show, man? This is ridiculous. That's right. Well, cool, man. Yeah, I wish I had a little brighter topic or something to end on. What do you got to say, man? Like, cheer people up. I just made them.
Okay. Faith and freedom go hand in hand, and I have really had a transformation over the last few years on my personal views of faith, and I have come back to faith. I'm not in a denomination or church or anything like that, but I would definitely say that my outlook on life over the last year specifically has gotten better because I, in many ways, have removed the trust in just myself and placed it into a higher power. And I think that's a very positive thing. And I'm starting to come back to the realization of why faith and religion were such cornerstones of Western society for so many hundreds of years. Even regardless of what you may think about it, or the dark side that may have been under parts of it, the fact of the matter is it was a rallying point. It was a rallying call. It was a place for societies to unify and come with a common sense of culture and a common sense of community. And I'm personally finding that I can enjoy that a little bit again, in a way that I never thought I would say that. There was years I was an avowed militant atheist, and I'm not anymore. And 2020 opened my eyes, and I think that all I see now is positive. All I see now is hope, and nothing is scary. I'm not really scared of much at this point. If anything, quite frankly, I'm ready to run headfirst, sword drawn, into the challenges that are thrown my way by the evil of this world, knowing that I'm on the right side of things.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's awesome. Isn't it amazing how we grow throughout life if you're willing to accept growth?
Yeah. If you're willing to admit you're not the smartest dude in the room.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just amazing when I think back on myself from 20, 30 to 40 to 50 to, what am I now? 60?
27, right?
But yeah, you grow, man, throughout life, and it's okay to admit that you didn't fucking know everything back then, right? Even though you thought you did. Even though you thought you had all the answers.
Based on our experience. Circling back to what you were saying earlier, we all think we're the smartest guy because we've all lived it, right? Yeah. Well, I thought I had lived it. I came back from war a broken dude, thinking that, I had figured out the truth because I had seen the conspiracy of the Iraq conflict, and I didn't know shit, man. I still don't know shit. And it's so freeing to realize how much you don't really know, because then it's not just all on you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a nice thing.
I think perspective is a valuable tool if people have more perspective about just their place and, in all of this, quite honestly. We all think that what we're doing here is the most important thing, and it is to us at the time because we're living it. But when you look at the totality of like the length of how long things have been going on, it's just a speck.
We're a blip.
Yeah. It's like the people that are like talking about all the things that we're doing to harm everything. And it's like, you know what, man, the earth's going to be just fine, dude. George Carlin did a bit back in the days. Right. Remember that?
Yes.
And he's like, yeah, the earth's going to be just fine, man. It's going to shrug us off like
a bad case of the fleas if it wants to.
Yeah. It's going to be this like whatever, but it's still going to be here, even though, maybe humanity may not. So it's just an interesting thing when people get so wrapped around the axle about their importance and everything. So it's just take a chill, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Don't get so worked up over the little stuff, man.
Pour yourself some Maker's Mark. Yeah.
We got my buddy Data. I know he's watching tonight. This is his bottle of Tito's. I bought a bottle, so whenever we celebrate a win.
Is that tequila? What is that?
It's a vodka.
Oh, okay.
It's a vodka.
Okay. Yep. I was about to say, does that have a worm in it?
No.
I'm not a hard alcohol drinker too much. I'm not a connoisseur. I might have a cocktail now and then. What's that?
So you should have seen him in Tennessee. He knew what he was
doing. Oh yeah, no, I'm not going to turn it down, dude. I'll socialize with you, but for sure. Yeah, I'm a beer guy.
I like a good beer.
Yeah, for sure. Well, right on. I appreciate everybody stopping by this evening and listen to us ramble on about silly things and maybe not some silly things, but it's been great having you on again, Spags.
Thanks for having me. We'll have a Deadpool, a bet, see if this one gets taken down too.
Yeah, man. Homesteading is not harmful content.
Homesteading is not harmful content. And hey, guys, I bought 2 of those shirts, one for me, one for my wife, but they're coming in the mail tomorrow. I was so hoping it would be here for this show.
I know, man. Mine's on the way as well. So appreciate it. Appreciate all the support of the channel. And thanks for everybody showing up. And yeah, we'll see you guys on the next one.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
Right on.